Hello and good day. Today we'll be going forward. This class is for MKT 822 pricing policies, and today we'll be looking at the determinants of pricing. When we talk about determinants, we're referring to drivers, things that are considered in fixing prices. And in this discussion, we'll look at the demand determinants, the cost determinants, and some other determinants that are not as important as the first two, but in one way or the other, they have a way of influencing prices. Okay, I'm trying to share my screen with you. So first, let's look at the demand determinant of pricing. From our earlier discussion, we've looked at the pricing objectives. We talked about profits, we talked about sales, and now looking at the demand determinants of pricing, we'll look at first the nature of demand. Demand is a very popular concept, primarily from economics. And when we talk about demand, it's the quantity of a product that will be bought in the market at various prices within a particular period of time. And we expect, in line with the rule of demand, that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. And the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. So, in principle, this has a way of demand has a very big role to play in pricing, just as this rule states. So when the price is high, when we fix a high price, obviously we should expect a drop in the quantity demanded. However, under the same demand concept, there are exceptions to this rule. And that leads us to discussing the elasticity of demand. When we look at elasticity, we're talking about the extent to which consumers are sensitive to changes in price. Their responsiveness, the way they react when there is a change in price. That is the elasticity of demand. And in line with this, we have an elastic and inelastic demand. Now, we can say that demand is elastic when a change in price leads to a less proportionate change in quantity demanded. For instance, you decrease price by 10%, but increase in quantity demanded increases by merely, say, 3%. So it doesn't flow with the rule. On the other hand, an inelastic demand is a situation where a proportionate change in price leads to a more than proportionate change in quantity demanded. So we can increase price by 5%, and the decrease in quantity demanded goes as high as 10%. That's an inelastic demand. And a product could have elastic or inelastic demand depending on the nature of that product. For instance, luxury goods tend to have an elastic demand because it is not a necessity. Consumers can do without them. So when you increase price, they could decide to, you know, concentrate on necessities, the essentials. Also, the extent to which consumers have become loyal to the brand also affects the elasticity of demand. Also, the total amount in comparison in relation to the consumer income could also affect demand. If we're talking about uh, a product that is sold for 50 naira and then you increase it to 70 naira, and then a man who earns 150,000 a month, that change in price would not affect his consumption of that product, or may not affect his consumption of that product. So these are the factors that affect demand, or rather, that affects pricing from demand perspective. Now let's look at the yield management system. Yield management system. When we talk about yield management, yield management is a variable pricing strategy based on understanding, anticipating, and influencing consumer behavior in order to maximize sales or profit from a perishable resource. When we talk about yield, we're looking at output. So the term yield management is referring to a way of getting the best out of a fixed output. And this process, in a bid to get the best out of a fixed output, an organization may engage in price discrimination, a situation where the organization charges different customers different prices for the same quantity of products. And for yield management to take place, there are three essential conditions. First is that there is a fixed amount of resources available from which the organization wants to get the best out of. If resources are unlimited, there may not be a need to engage in yield management because you can get as much as you want. Second is that the resource sold are perishable. By perishable means that it cannot last forever. It is time bound. There's a time within which you are supposed to sell them, after which it ceases to be of value. So within this time frame, the organization has to sell them, ensure that as much as possible they can get from it. Number three condition is that different customers are willing to pay different prices for using the same amount of resources. So that's why I said earlier that it leads to price discrimination because the same resource, the same product applies to different persons at different prices. Now let's take a look at the cost determinants of demand. Aside looking at having a customer perspective, Primarily, organizations must understand their costing as a way of effective pricing, or effectively pricing their goods and services. It is on the basis of cost that most prices are fixed. So, the cost of production, the cost of material purchase, the cost of labor, helps to give the organization an amount within which they shouldn't go below. Gives them a floor, a minimum amount within which they can't go below. As is expected, they go below, they're already incurring losses. So let's look at the cost determinant. Now you have a markup price. Markup price. When we talk about a markup, it's a percentage of the cost of the goods that is added to the cost to get the selling price. That's a markup. The other side of the coin is the margin, which is a percentage of the selling price. But the markup is the percentage of the cost price. This percentage added is called the markup, and is the difference between the cost of the goods and the selling price. As I said earlier, the cost becomes a floor within which an organization cannot go below in fixing prices, and it helps in determining price, because as the markup pricing says, we can calculate a percentage and then add it. Probably with our products, is the cost of producing a unit is 10 naira, and we think that a 10% return on investment is good enough. We can take a 10% of the cost, that's the markup, and add 10% of the 10 naira should give us 1 naira, and then we'll sell it at 11 naira. So it gives us an idea of what our selling prices should be. So a markup is added onto the total cost incurred by the producer of a good in order to cover cost of doing business and create a profit. And it's in the course of trying to do this that the organization can stay afloat. No matter how wonderful an organization performs, if it doesn't make enough profit to sustain its operations, it's obviously going to go under in no distant time. Second, you can also look at the profit maximization price. Profit maximization price. A lot of times, organizations focus attention on maximizing profit. And profit is maximized when the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. And the marginal revenue talks about the additional revenue of selling an extra 1 unit. On the other hand, the marginal cost is the extra cost of producing an additional 1 unit. So as long as the revenue of the last unit produced and sold is greater than the cost of the last unit produced and sold, the firm can continue to stay in business because they are believed to be maximizing profit. And in the long term, the total cost becomes lower, as you can see in this graphical representation. The MC is the marginal cost. The ATC is the average total cost. Now let's look at the break-even pricing. First, the break-even point is a point in the pricing uh, graph where an organization makes either a profit nor incurs a loss. So the break-even pricing is the practice of setting a price at a point with zero profit or loss. So we can say that the break-even pricing is selling at total cost, such that you incur profit nor loss. And the intention is that with a price as low as your cost, you should be able to the price as low as your cost, you should be able to penetrate the market and gain. So that will help to penetrate the market, gain market share, and drive some competitors out of the market space. And also that could help an organization to increase their volume of sales. A look at the break-even analysis will help to determine the number of units that organizations must sell to be able to ensure that profit or loss happens. So a typical break-even model assumes that a given fixed cost and a constant average variable cost exist. It is only on this assumption that this position can be attained. In most cases, new entrants into the market, new products, tries to assume this position and then begin to work at uh, attaining volume rather than profit. Over time, this business model is also adjusted because once they've been able to gain market share, gradually they'll become more interested in profit than in market share. There are some advantages of the break-even pricing. First is that it creates an entry barrier for new entrants. Organizations trying to come into the market may take a second thought when they observe that existing companies are selling at a low profit situation or no profit position. Hence, it also reduces competition and it helps a firm to achieve market dominance. Also, it has its own disadvantages because in a bid to avoid a no profit, no loss situation, product quality may suffer and other augmented services may also suffer. Also, it could affect the perception of value of customers. Um, from this part of the world, a lot of us have an idea that products that are not expensive are not so wonderful. So that perception of value may affect the organization. That even when it is selling at a relatively lower price than competitors, customers may not be willing to patronize them because of what they think the pricing portends for the product quality and performance. Also, it could lead to price wars among competitors in a bid to, you know, win over customers. Organizations may continue to cut down prices, uh, which others will respond to, and that results to a price war, and the whole essence is also defeated. Having done this, I will advise that you go through the courseware you have on the platform, attempt these FAQs and raise your questions. I will try to create a discussion on the LMS such that we can also discuss on the platform. Thank you for your time.